Well, on that note, we are going to go ahead and start up here. So, thank you guys and welcome to the legal table. I'm your host, Crystal Jamerson, and I'm the Community Engagement and Outreach Coordinator for Legal Services of Northwest Minnesota. The legal table was created to educate you on your rights and your responsibilities, along with introduce you to community organizations that have resources to help you along the way. So today we're here to address senior exploitation in Minnesota. As you know, senior exploitation, gosh, make sure to say that right. It refers to abuse, manipulation, unfair treatment of older adults, and it's often for financial gain, personal benefit, or other purposes. So this can include financial fraud, neglect, physical or emotional abuse, and other forms of mistreatment that take the advantage of vulnerabilities of associated with aging. So today we're trying to make sure that people in the communities that we serve are aware of the process and the resources available for its community members. As you know, Legal Services of Northwest Minnesota, and I'm still sharing my screen, so I'll make sure that I get to my little part here. Boom. We serve 22 counties. We have 3 offices in areas where we assist clients in navigating the justice system and provide services for low-income individuals with their civil legal needs. Outside of providing full representation for a client, we have legal kiosks in 87 of our service areas, 87 locations. And that provides assistance with virtual court, legal documents. We also have a justice bus, which is our mobile clinic that allows us to go into the communities where transportation is kind of limited to provide legal assistance. And we also have self-help clinics to assist with do-it-yourself kind of court forms. So we want to make sure that in any avenue that we're able to bring civil legal justice to you, we're going to try. We hope to just bring you some more information about civil legal topics throughout the year. So make sure you continue to join us and pass the information along to coworkers and clients. This is really something for the community at large. With that being said, want to make sure that I got that out of the way. Mara Peterson from Elder Justice is here to give us some information. So excited about that. And we also have our Chief of Police, Hunter Rawson from the Dilworth Police Department. So a very huge thank you to both of you guys for joining us today and being our panelist. Real quick though, I do want to make sure that I always address the house rules. So please make sure to put all questions in the chat and we'll get to them at the end of the presentation. Also, this is a quick hour-long meeting, so if you would like more information, each panelist will have their information listed at the end of the meeting. This meeting will also be available on our YouTube channel by the end of the week, so if you have coworkers that were unable to make it, please make sure to check out our channel. All right, without further ado, we're going to go ahead and turn it over to Mart, and we will go from there. Thank you so much, Mart.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Crystal. I appreciate it a lot.
And I'm going to unshare my screen. Give me 1 second. Sorry about that.
No, not to worry. Okay,
There
and then now I will try sharing mine. Thank you, everybody, for riding along with us on this way, this technological way. Okay. Now, I'd like to share this mode. Is it? Can you see the slideshow there? Okay,
yes,
great. Thank you,
Crystal.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Hunter. Okay, thank you so much. And I really just first want to thank everybody for attending and for spending time with us this afternoon. I want to thank Crystal, and I want to thank Legal Services of Northwestern Minnesota for inviting the Elder Justice Center to be here. It's really wonderful to be able to share information with this group. These are exactly folks that we'd like to reach with information about our organization. So I'll get to it. And then again, please help me if I use any acronyms or abbreviations that are not clear, please stop me and I will be happy to define those things. Happy to have conversation and questions at the end, as Crystal indicated. And so I'll jump in here. But again, if I can clarify, please don't hesitate to ask. So I'm here representing the Minnesota Elder Justice Center. My name is Mart Peterson, and I'm the Associate Director there. I've been with the Minnesota Elder Justice Center since 2015. I joined in the year after it was founded, and I've done a lot of different roles there in my time. I have been on the helpline. I have been a trainer and a coordinator of our education, and now I supervise those programs, our direct service programs, and our training and education programs. And it's a wonderful environment with a lot of really engaging and thoughtful advocacy happening, which is what I'd like to tell you about. So I've got our mission up on the screen, and we've got action happening in these kind of four primary areas. We think of these as our sort of four programmatic areas. We do public awareness activities, so we share information with members of the public, and in some sense that's happening here now today. Folks are always members of their own communities, of course, and then professional education as well, also happening here when we gather with folks who are working with older or vulnerable adults across the state of Minnesota. We do public policy advocacy. We advocate for laws that will help and benefit older or vulnerable folks who have experienced forms of abuse, neglect, or exploitation. And then we do provide direct service. And by direct service, I mean a particular type of helpline advocacy that we model around domestic violence advocacy. So we have a helpline, and I'll share all the information about how to reach us on the helpline, in which we speak with folks who are concerned about abuse, neglect, financial exploitation, answer questions, and give guidance around those questions. We also talk with family members of people who may be concerned. They may be concerned about someone in their family, or we talk with neighbors, friends, and we talk with a lot of professionals who are working with older or vulnerable adults who they are concerned about. So we receive calls from a lot of different places, and we respond again in that caller directed or participant directed manner of the domestic violence helpline. So thinking about again how we think about the abuse, neglect, and exploitation of older adults, something that happens again often at the hands of a person that they know or trust. And so when we think about the connections between family relationships, kinship relationships, close relationships of trust, and the prevalence of experiences of abuse, neglect, and financial exploitation, that's one of the reasons that we think about elder abuse as in many ways a form of domestic or a manifestation of domestic violence. As you can see here with regard to the calls that come into our helpline, we get a lot of calls from folks who are concerned about the actions of a family member, and that's fairly broadly defined. We don't have a specific definition of family that we're operating with, so we let callers self-identify in that way. And then a lot of folks are calling the Minnesota Elder Justice Center helpline because they're concerned about financial harm, financial exploitation. And so I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But I also want to point out that a lot of folks call us and they're experiencing more than one kind of harm. They might be experiencing some financial exploitation or financial harm, theft. But the person who's taking money from them is also threatening them, or also maybe even physically abusing them. And so we have often scenarios in which we see folks experience what we call polyvictimization, which is an experience of more than one form of abuse at the same time. And we or sequentially or sort of in a period of time. And so we really want to be attuned to the things that our neighbors and family members might say to us, just picking up on the kind of overlapping experiences that people might have. Sometimes when somebody talks about a concern in one area, they may also actually be experiencing challenges in another area here. So, and when we think about the way, again, these kinds of things happen, it's not necessarily surprising that more than one form of harm happens at one time. This is a power and control wheel that was adapted to reflect experiences of older adults. If you've worked in social service and seen domestic violence education or resources, you might find this familiar. This power and control wheel was adapted from a very familiar teaching tool used by a lot of domestic violence advocacy providers that is called the Duluth Power and Control Wheel. And this graphic shows the way that perpetrators of elder abuse, neglect, financial exploitation use emotional and psychological abuse to affect these outcomes. They've maybe, again, threatening. Sometimes, again, when older folks who have experienced abuse, neglect, or financial exploitation, or vulnerable adults who are experiencing those things, are relying on folks who are perpetrating for access to perhaps healthcare, access to social life, access to spiritual communities of support. And so sometimes perpetrators will deny access to those things. I won't give you a ride. I won't give you a ride to your medical appointment. I won't give you a ride to your social commitment. So we know that these are some examples of some of the tools that are used by folks perpetrating elder abuse in order to do so. And again, we see here in the diagram that power and control is really situated at the center of these experiences as well. One person exerting power over another person, in this case, exerting power over an older or a vulnerable adult. I did say I would talk a little bit more about financial exploitation, and I do want to do that because, again, it does make up a majority of calls that are at least the initial outreach we receive on behalf of any individual on the Elder Justice Center helpline. And when we receive calls on financial exploitation, these are just some examples of things that people have been concerned about. Now, it's important to notice that in isolation, these experiences may not represent harm of any kind. These are the kinds of financial decisions or transactions we might engage in as normal folks going about our business. We might, we might make changes to the titles of our property. We might use a power of attorney. But in these cases of financial exploitation, just note there's just some other layer happening here. Power of attorney is appropriate, but using it to do something that's not for the benefit of the principal person is not appropriate, right? I mean, picking up a coin that you find on the ground, fine, but routinely taking somebody else's loose money around the house, starts to be questionable. Sometimes it's important to have access to the equity available in our home. Sometimes a reverse mortgage is a useful financial tool for folks, but sometimes it's not. And so we just want to be discerning as we are offering support to the folks around us who are engaging in financial decision making, and especially if we know folks who are supporting another person's financial decision making, just making sure those folks have the resources they need to be the financial supporter that they want to be. I will just flag a couple of things here that I want to draw your attention to as themes that really emerge significantly for us on the telephone helpline. And the first thing is changes in title of real property. I just want to make sure that I caution everybody to get really good legal advice if you're thinking of adding somebody to the title of your property. It's fairly easy to engage in those types of changes. We make it fairly straightforward for property owners to make those decisions and execute them in a legal manner by recording a new title at a county recorder's office. However, the implications of having done that are significant legally. So that's one that I draw folks' attention to. We get a lot of calls on the helpline from folks who have made changes to real property titles. And sometimes that's happened under the influence of another person. So somebody who is offering undue influence, causing somebody to do something with their property that they wouldn't have otherwise done. It can be very legally complex to walk those changes back. And it can also be costly to do so. In fact, something that sometimes is concerning to people is that it may cost money to seek legal advice around making these kinds of changes, but there are resources available. So for example, some resources that Crystal referenced at the beginning of the discussion that might offer a little bit of guidance or information around making those types of changes. And those resources may be available at low or at no cost. So, however, if something needs to be changed later on, that can be an expensive prospect. So just calling that out. The other one is living rent-free. I want to just encourage folks who are looking at making living arrangements with family members to think very carefully about what the beginning and sort of end parameters of those relationships might be. And we all have family members who have lived with us at different times, or we may have family members who might live with us at different times, and we live with different members of our families at different times. So it's certainly natural that within those contexts, we're going to be living with folks, but we just want to understand what the circumstances of that are, because another very regular helpline call we receive is when somebody's welcomed a person into their home and then that person is no longer willing to leave. And so that can be a legally complex situation, especially if the homeowner themselves is an older or a vulnerable adult. And so we want to make sure that we have folks that are just thinking very carefully about making commitments when we're offering that kind of support for those folks that are in our families. That's just a couple examples. Again, when we're thinking about financial exploitation in particular, if we want to be attuned to red flags for financial exploitation, we want to be looking for patterns of behavior. So patterns of unusual spending, patterns of influence that might take the shape of some of these things on this list. And when we see those patterns, it might prompt us to have just a further conversation with the person we're concerned about. Do you have any questions about what's happening? Do you feel like you know what's going on with your money? Again, I know this is easier said than done, because one of the reasons I think financial exploitation happens fairly easily is we are naturally very private about our money. It's not something that we're very used to talking about with other people, and we aren't particularly used to asking questions about it. Then for older adults in particular, I want to observe that sometimes asking questions about what's happening with our money, or revealing that we might not be sure, or revealing that we might have even been taken advantage of, can result in the people that we care about asking us whether we should be in charge of our money anymore. And that happens with older and vulnerable adults in particular. So just for us to be aware as community members and family members that sometimes when the older adults around us reveal that they would like our help, it can be counterproductive for our first reaction to be, well, maybe you should no longer be in charge at all. So stepping into that helping relationship one step at a time. Minnesota has a very robust response to experiences of abuse, neglect, and financial exploitation. And you may have run across advocates in various capacities, not only in law enforcement, but also with regard to long-term care ombudsman or ombudsman for mental health and developmental disabilities, our adult protection partners who work for county units of adult protection, and can provide some emergency protective services. There are state departments of health and commerce that investigate complaints that happen in specific settings or on behalf of specific types of service providers. So there's a complex system of response. I talked about our criminal justice system, civil justice, civil legal system, civil legal aid. Within the context of folks receiving long-term care or assisted living services, there are systems of governance within those settings as well. So a lot of players here at the table when we have a response to a person who's experienced abuse, neglect, or financial exploitation. And sometimes folks just have questions about, like, what will happen? What will happen if I call the Minnesota Adult Abuse Reporting Center? Now, for many of us who work in this field who are mandated reporters, we kind of know what would happen when we call the Minnesota Adult Abuse Reporting Center. But for folks who have not had interaction with these systems before, it can be a bit intimidating, and we can maybe be uncertain about whether something we've experienced is even appropriate to report. So those are situations where we can help at the Elder Justice Center. Folks can call us and say, what would happen if I called the Minnesota Adult Abuse Reporting Center? What do you think would happen if I don't do anything? What might happen if I call my clergy person? What are the options I would have if I wanted to go to my bank and make a change to make some account more secure? So those kinds of questions, general questions that folks might have, are things that we can field on the helpline at the Elder Justice Center. And here's the contact information for our helpline. I will make sure that this contact information is widely available as well. And you can see as well that our website has an online form. I will just say we have kind of 3 tiers of advocacy we provide through our helpline. We can provide what we would describe as helpline advocacy, one-time engagement in which a person has questions and we try to answer or provide referrals. Sometimes folks need a little bit more help, so we can connect with them in an ongoing way, and we let advocates on the helpline determine when that would be appropriate. And then under certain circumstances and for particular kinds of cases, we actually can provide direct legal representation. Some of those cases include issues related to guardianship and conservatorship. And in particular, when a person who is subject to guardianship or conservatorship is experiencing abuse, neglect, or exploitation. And then another instance is in that situation I described earlier, if a person is a homeowner and they are experiencing abuse in their own home, we can sometimes help legally with that situation. So what we try to do at the Elder Justice Center in terms of legal representation is to kind of complement but not duplicate what our partners at Legal Services are providing, because we try to work together. And those are some good examples of instances in which we can often step in a little bit more easily than our partners in legal services, particularly in the landlord homeowner matters, because legal services rightfully is oriented around tenant advocacy, and that is an important thing for our legal service partners to do. So we try to help out in these other ways. When folks call us, this is what they can expect. We can offer supportive listening, something I think is very important and sometimes kind of undersung as a critical service. I will say, when we receive positive feedback on the helpline, very regularly people will say, "I'm so glad I had an opportunity just to share my story." And the extent to which folks are wanting to be heard in their situation, I think, is telling as to the environments and opportunities we make available to older adults to tell about their experience. Um, and we also have certain goals. We want to acknowledge the experience a person has had, and then we really want to make sure we're getting folks meaningful information in a timely way. So whether that's referral or information about the sort of universe of systems responses to their circumstance, whether it is in fact acknowledging that what's happened has been a traumatic experience for them that needs a response. Those are all things that we are focused on doing in those calls. And we want to allow folks who call us to set their own agenda. So we try to make sure that we're hearing carefully what people identify as their primary goal. Sometimes folks call with a very distinct and obvious civil legal issue, but resolving that particular civil legal issue is not their primary goal. Sometimes their primary goal might be reconciliation with a family member. Sometimes their primary goal might be moving to a different location to live. So it's often interesting when we're talking with folks what prompts their call and then what goes on to define their own priorities. Try to hear that as we engage. So we try to just, again, meet folks where they're at is the language that we hear so often. As I talked a little bit about this, we collaborate as a team and we collaborate with other folks on behalf of callers. So when folks call, we try to understand what support network is available to participants who are interested in getting information or receiving help from us. And that relationship building is really critically important, I think, in order for us to achieve those participant-defined goals. We want folks to be able to confide their goals in us. I also just want to offer for folks who serve older adults or vulnerable adults on the call, we do quite a bit of technical assistance with professionals. So we get a lot of calls on the helpline from folks who are mandated reporters or who are serving in various capacities, but have run across another aspect of the Vulnerable Adult Act that is unfamiliar, or another interesting conundrum that they would like to put heads together on. So that's another service that we provide to a lot of our partners, is just to be able to work together, to problem solve together, or to bounce ideas off each other in service of clients. So when we have the ability to do that, please don't hesitate if reaching out to us in that manner would be helpful to you. And folks we get phone calls from a wide range of folks, and we are always happy to talk with people who have questions. We are happy to talk, and really, if you're running into something that's particularly frustrating and you have a moment as a service provider to share that with us, we like to know that too. It helps us, again, to identify even policy priorities that we would like to advocate around. And I'll just refer to our policy work and systems change work because I really in particular want to mention, and I'm moving very quickly through these last few slides. Oh, I think I have our social media on here, but I don't have just our specific website. I apologize for that. Oh, you can see it here on the bottom link here. It is elderjusticemn.org. And I wanted to mention that just because we do have on our website information about our weekly webinars. We also have informational webinars that have to do with issues related to older and vulnerable adult abuse, neglect, or financial exploitation, and how to respond to those things. And they're free. And so if this is an area of interest for you, please feel free to join us on any of those weekly webinars. It's pretty easy to register for them. And once you're registered, you'll get a periodic email that has the upcoming webinars listed on it. So that is what I wanted to share initially about the Minnesota Elder Justice Center and our helpline advocacy services. And so I'll just stop there so I don't take up the whole time with talking about MEJC. And Crystal, I'll hand it back to you before I know we're going to turn it over to Hunter. Thank you, Chief
Yes.
Rawson.
Thank you so much, Marit, for being on. Something that I didn't think about is the supportive listening. When you brought that up in your conversation, there's so many times where just being heard solves 50% of the solution, 50% of the problem at that point in time, especially with older adults. As I go to different fairs and they come up to me, I always say, I am not a lawyer, but they do want to kind of talk about their story. And sometimes just listening to their story and making the time helps just to calm that situation they're in. So I really like that. And I don't think I've ever seen any of our organizations so far that had that opportunity in there. So and there are some questions that have come in on one of our other places that we're broadcasting. So I'll make sure to save those for the end. So thank you again. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
We
you.
are going to move on to Chief Rawson from Dilworth Police Department. Thank you so much, Mr. Rawson, for coming in. If you would like to go ahead on, we'll turn the mic over to you.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Merritt, and thank you, Crystal. Good afternoon, everyone. As Crystal said, my name is Hunter Rawson. I'm the Chief of Police for Dilworth, Minnesota. I've been the chief for about a month now. But before that, I've been with the Dilworth Police Department for 21 years, and 17 of those years have been investigator. So over the course of my career, I have come across many financial exploitation cases, abuse cases. And Merritt brought up an excellent point when she was talking about the MARC, the Minnesota Adult Abuse Reporting Center. The majority of my calls or involvement comes from this. This is an anonymous website that you can go to where you're anonymous and you can file any type of complaint or any type of concern. Once that is filed, it is immediately sent to myself and also with Clay County Adult Protective Services. At that point, we review the case to see if there is something to it, if it's what kind of conversation I need to have with either the reporter, who is anonymous, or with the victim. So over the course of my career, I'm going to kind of go into some of my exploitations that I've seen come across my desk. And these are really targeting the older population, the less tech savvy. One is, and I've had this several times, and I'm not sure if anyone here has actually had it. It's called a grandparent scam, where you have a caller who pretends to be the grandchild of the individual that they located online. So what they'll normally do is, and what I've seen is, they will contact the parent and go, usually it's the grandmother, they'll go, "Hi, grandma, do you know who this is?" And the grandparent will usually respond with the person's name, who they think it might be their grandchild. Then that imposter will use that name to further communicate with that individual, with the grandparent. They will try to seek out some type of financial service, some type of monetary gain, saying, "Grandma, I just got arrested. Don't call mom or dad. I need some money." So they're trying to prey on the grandparents' feelings and concern and love for their grandchild. I've had last year, I believe had 3 or 4 of those type of calls where some money was given over. The one thing I always stress is always verify the caller. You know, as a grandparent and me as a father, if my child gets in trouble, oh, I'm going to be calling that. Yeah, I want to call that parent to find out what's going on. So when in doubt, always call someone to verify. And that is really pretty much everything within financial exploitation for some of the scams that we see. Call, double check, and verify. And when in doubt, call the police. I will have that conversation with you. I will do the open source investigation for you just to verify. So some of the other cases that I've come across, and I'll kind of go into some of my details on some of the unfortunate events. But one we've also seen is called the sweetheart scam, where a suspect will use social media to identify a potential victim. And this is actually used at different levels, different ages. So it's not just for elders, where they will try to establish a relationship with someone online. Usually if they're overseas, very little communication, but it's usually some type of texting or emailing. They will then say, they'll look for little sums of income. Hey, I need some money for such and such. And then the requests become larger and larger. A couple of years ago, we had an incident where we had it was in the newspapers. We had a female in town that was acting as a middle person, where these scams were overseas. They were contacting multiple individuals in Canada, the U.S., outside the U.S., where we estimated approximately $2 million was given out. And they are all different courses of victims. One was a sitting judge. Some of these are very financial astute individuals, very smart. It doesn't matter. Everyone can be a victim. One of the key takeaways from any type of online romance is don't send any money. And if you have to have a conversation with someone, always be leery of where they're at in the world. When in doubt, again, just ask. Talk to a family member. Talk to the police. Talk to your clergy. Just ask some of the questions. Never be embarrassed. And that's what I find out is that when people get along in this process, they become embarrassed and don't want to tell anyone. But please reach out to your law enforcement. Please reach out to Merritt. Reach out to Crystal. Reach out to someone. We will keep your information anonymous and just work with you through this process. Some of the other schemes that we've seen is telemarketing. Recently, I guess I was advised that my identity was being used after I became chief of police to try to get some type of charity money. And the person, we got a complaint, and the person they said sounded from a different continent, and my voice is fairly unique. So never give out money to someone who's calling you. Always verify, if you wish to give money to anyone, verify who you're going to give it to online. Find your own source of information. Google it, contact them directly. I never give any money out to anyone that calls me. I just don't. I don't think it's a good habit. I get nervous of that because I can't verify who that person is, even with caller ID. And the tech support fraud. This is usually targeting our older population because they're not as tech savvy, where someone will call up pretending for Microsoft saying you have errors on your computer. And they will request money to fix your computer. And this happens. I've had this one a couple months ago. We had someone in town that went through this process. The first thing is it's a lie because they can't access your computer. It's not possible unless you give them permission, and they're cold calling you saying, hey, we are on your computer. We saw these flags. Can you please go to your computer and turn it on? And then you do not give them any information. They try to convince you to access their computer through a team viewer or something else to share the computer screen with them. And they will access sometimes some of your account information. And unfortunately, that's when we get involved. Some of the other schemes that I'm aware of, but I've never come across it. And I think Merritt hit a couple of these: the investment schemes, homeowner reverse mortgage scams, Medicare and health scams. The rule of thumb, and I tell this to everyone, if you didn't initiate contact, you're being scammed. And that's really what it comes down to it. If you don't start the process, realistically, you're being scammed. And I can't, and it's not just one population, older population. Again, I'll go into another detail of an incident where I had a financial advisor for a very prominent doctor in Arizona. And the financial advisor was convinced through an email that his doctor wanted $50,000 in cash, wanted this check cut for him. This was all done via email. Okay, no communication at all, no verbal communication. It came through one of my banks in town. The bank, thank goodness, said, hey, something suspicious with this. So I was able to contact the financial advisor and say, hey, this is something odd. And he was set for that. It was the doctor. I said, I'll tell you what, call the doctor right now. Let me know. He called the doctor. The doctor was not out of the country. He just got out of surgery. He was being scammed. This is a financial advisor, someone who had access to a lot of money, but he never communicated with that person. It was just done over email. I have been a victim of data breaches. I've had emails. My wife has been a victim too for some identity theft, and I'll go into that. The one thing I've noticed is, especially with technology nowadays, people forget to communicate or just to talk to a person. That is unfortunate, but even as the older population, you remember the old phones where you can hang them up on the wall. If you hit the phone down hard enough, it actually rings. Sometimes you could actually activate the bell. If you're old enough, maybe at a party line, I'm not sure. But we miss the days of verbal communication. You can't read emails. You can't understand tone. You can't understand the language. The one thing you can understand, though, if you see the grammar that is incorrect from an email, be suspicious. That's usually odd. So some of those are some of the scams that come across our office. And when we come across that is we usually get a report from a family member, from the victim itself, or from the Minnesota Adult Abuse Reporting Center. We get a MARC report. We will talk to that individual and try to track where the communication came from. We'll do search warrants on IP addresses, phone numbers. Unfortunately, most times the money is overseas. And for a long period, and a lot of it, we were able to, some went to India, a lot went to Somalia at one point. So we were able to track the money there, but unfortunately, that's about as far as we can go. So I want everyone out there who's listening, who knows anyone, due diligence. When in doubt, ask. That is the key thing. And I just wish people were more communicative. I want to go into financial abuse. That's where financial exploitation. I know this is where Merritt was hitting on as well. Most of my cases through the MARC report, again, these are anonymous, will come through a family member that is possibly caring for an older parent. And there's some money that might have been missing or some questionable money from one sibling. What are they using it for? There is, what I've learned through the course of my years is you can pay yourself almost a salary from that, from your parents. If you're the fiduciary or power of attorney, there is some money that you can allocate for yourself. It's not definitive. There's no definitive amount, but our APS department will say, if you're paying yourself $400 a month to care for a parent, and that's your primary job, that's something we don't look at as a financial exploitation. If you're using the money for your parents for their benefit, that's what it's there for. If you're buying yourself a new car that doesn't benefit your parent, if you're using it to refurnish your home that your parent does not live in, these are exploitation. Now, we receive many of these. We receive I'd say between 100 and 200 MARC reports a year. So most are financial exploitation, where we have either a miscommunication or not an understanding. And one recent that I had was we had a parent living with his daughter, and one sibling thought that this daughter was taking advantage of the dad. The dad would allegedly report this information to a mandated reporter. When I would interview the father, I would take him aside and we would speak privately. And this is what we do as law enforcement, try to determine if what is happening. He refuted every statement. He said it never occurred. And a week later, I get a second mark report with the same information from the same mandated reporter. And again, I talked to the individual out of earshot of this daughter. Unfortunately, he still said, it's a misunderstanding. There's no concern. Sometimes social services is able to obtain the financial records of a potential vulnerable adult. For me, I need to get a search warrant. However, when APS is involved, they can actually send the information request to the bank and immediately get the bank records faster than I can with a search warrant. Then that is something that we look at. For law enforcement in general, when we get any type of report, we need to first talk to APS to see what their involvement is. Again, they can get some of the information faster than we can, but we always go out to do a welfare check on that individual. If it's a living condition concern, if it's a financial, what is happening? We want to put eyes on that person. Even if it's unfounded, we need that report made so at least we can say, this is not founded. We don't want someone slipping through the cracks. Just like with Child Protective Services, we need to go out on each one. We treat everyone the same. All law enforcements are the same. Please contact your local law enforcement. If you have any concerns at all, just talk to someone. We're there to help. All right, identity theft. Not sure how many people out there listening. I think we have 13 people have been victims of identity theft. I unmuted myself now. Sorry about that. Identity theft. This is something that happens with great frequency. It's unfortunate that with data breaches, I just got AT&T was data breach and I was notified. Feels like every other month I get a notification that I'm part of a data breach now. The only way I've noticed and where I get some victims have noticed that they become victims is they apply for unemployment benefits. They apply for health insurance, some type of benefit, and they realize, oh, someone already has my information. What you do immediately is what I did. This is my personal thing is we contacted all our credit cards, suspended everything immediately. Contacted my bank, spoke with my banker, said, hey, this is what's happening. What do I need to do? Do I freeze my accounts? I need to move my accounts. I will then follow up with a call to the police department, limited on what they can do, but at least you can start to get a case number. They will assign you a case number. So that way you have a record of it. And what I do is, I want to make sure I get this correct, is I file a complaint with the FTC. And I don't have this on my screen, so I apologize. It's called identitytheft.gov. It is a process where they will walk you through how to report it and start the recovery process. They will walk you through that entire process. It's unfortunate the amount of cases that we come into the police department, and we are a small town of just under 5,000. With an older population and a growing older population, there are more victims out there. So what I stress from anyone, if you have any concerns for anyone or someone you're a victim, please contact someone. Contact Merritt, contact Dilworth Police, Moorhead Police, Crystal. They will get you in touch with someone that can help. I think I'm running out of time. That's all I got, guys.
Thank you so much, Hunter. Oh my goodness. That was a lot of good information. And sometimes you don't want to just, go up to a police officer and say, if you see him on the street, hey, can you help me with something? You don't really know where to go. So I'm really glad that you were able to come up here and be able to talk about it. One thing that you said was call, double check, verify. I think that's huge because, normally I would just think, oh, I'm just going to, call somebody right away. But sometimes just doing that verification is key. Communicating is key. And nowadays, a lot of people, they're so into technology that they miss that just person to person, communication. And, even with adults or older adults, trying to navigate technology, thinking that maybe they're sending a text message to the right person. It's not going to the right person. They're missing that communication when all you have to do is maybe pick up a phone or stop over someone's house and be like, is this right? So communication, communication, communication. We have some questions that have popped in, so I want to give you guys some time to be able to answer those. And I want to also make sure to respect everybody's time and keeping us before 1 o'clock. First question I have, really quick, is going to go to Marit. So you had talked about when somebody is in their home, So do you help them evict someone out of an elder's house? You know, do you go about that process, or how do you go about that process?
Yeah, absolutely great question. And that answer is, under certain circumstances, yes, we can actually help folks with that process, eviction or removal process. The thing that I would want to say about that legal process is that for a person to get to the sort of state where they're willing to evict, which really, I mean, that creates a permanent record for the person who is subject to the eviction. Often it's a family member, you know, and that can be a really difficult situation, even to come to the decision to proceed in that way. So usually when people have made a decision that they want to remove the person, they've gone through a lot of heartache already to arrive in that place. So we try to tread really carefully, really help participants identify clear goals in those situations, because the legal process can be an arduous process. The notice period, for example, for folks who are living in a residence is long, because we want to encourage people to have enough time and opportunity to seek an alternative and living arrangement. But what happens in dynamics between older adults who are experiencing elder abuse in that situation is that the notice period basically creates a long period of heightened risk for the person who has maybe a potentially dangerous person living in their home. So we are very
Absolutely.
cautious when we enter into those strategies because of the elevated risk they can present. There are other tools that we can use as well in as an alternative to eviction, or those property specific strategies that are oriented around protective orders. Those are other ways that we can sometimes put distance between a perpetrator of harm and the person experiencing harm. But yet we can help with those situations.
Perfect. No, that's good information. Thank you so much. We had another message come in for Hunter. And this was in our chat. So let me move to this one really quick. So the person said, my father had the grandparent scam happen to him, and he gave away thousands of dollars. He now does not want to change his phone number. Do you think it's safe to keep the same phone number?
If that's how they initially contacted that individual, I would still say it is. I would like to see it change, but some people are set in their ways. So if we have a limit, if we can communicate with dad and say, hey, any unknown phone numbers, let's not accept anything. And that's the difficulty. As long as dad is of sound mind. And I look at my own father's in his 80s, he's not going to change his phone number for anything. So it doesn't matter. And he's an attorney. So I would say yes, but just make sure that dad understands not to be a victim. And I'm hoping if you reported that to the police department or the local police department, if there was some recourse that they were able to get anything at all, but it is difficult. So if you haven't reported it yet, please do. If it's in Dilworth, please report it to me. Or I have a new investigator now. He can also work on the case.
And as you're talking, it made me think, Hunter, when they're calling, obviously they probably don't want to call 911. Is it better for them to call 911 or the non-emergent number? Because I think a lot of people just think 911, I'm just going to call right away. Or would you advise them, hey, call non-emergent number always first? Or is there a better line that, you want people to call or contact you guys?
For us, I would prefer to call non-emergent because it's not an emergency at that time unless it's happening. Sorry, my radio's going off, so I'm on call.
Nope,
So I
that's okay.
apologize for that.
That's okay.
For For Dilworth Police, I'll use us as an example, and most other agencies. Anytime you call the non-emergency number after hours when our office is closed, you will get dispatched no matter what. The same on 911 talk, then same 911 dispatchers. But try during the day if you can to call the non-emergency number, because that way we can actually get some information right away and try to do a little maybe research before we even visit with you to see if we have a phone number. I can start to do some open source investigations. Law enforcement, we have some other capabilities to do some searches and see what we can do. See if we can find out where that phone number came from. Try to do a little bit of research before you actually visit a person.
I have to just corroborate that, Chief Ross, and I think that's so helpful. And just I appreciate that you're encouraging folks to reach out, because we just know. I mean, to Crystal's point earlier, it's very helpful again for people to just like articulate what's happened to them. Sometimes even even in terms of like organizing my own thoughts, it's very helpful for me to like make that initial outreach, that initial report, where I have to sort of organize my own response to what's happened and say, hey, here's what happened and here's when and the time frames, and that can be very helpful organizationally just for the whole process. But also we know too, again, I know how frustrating it can be for folks when recovery is not available or so challenging. And at the same time, those reports matter so much because they help other folks. They help law enforcement kind of create a picture of what's happening. Sometimes there are multiple investigations, or there are multiple victims of one perpetrator or fraudster, and sometimes those cases can get put together in ways that are helpful. So those reporting steps are so valuable, and I just appreciate emphasizing that, because it is that outreach we're like out a little bit out of practice with, perhaps, given the technological circumstances of our lives.
Well, and
Well
also
said, Matt. Thank you.
You guys put in some really good notes, or so there is in the chat, there is a link to reporting identity theft. So what Hunter was talking about, the identitytheft.gov, I believe Mart put that in the chat. So if you are a community provider and you are looking to be able to assist one of your clients in reporting identity theft, that's probably a really great resource to go to. And I also see that Mary Rhea from Legal Aid State Support is on the line today, and she provided a link for resources for victims of identity theft on Law Help MN. Law Help MN is an amazing resource that we have for Minnesotans. They also have lawhelp.org or .com. And that one is for any state. So for some reason, even if you're living in Minnesota, but the discrepancy is in a different state, you are able to still see the state resources that are available. And I see Mary Rhea pop up. Mary, if you wanted to talk about Law Help really quickly, I want to make sure to keep everybody on time here. And I do have one other question for the panelists today, but you could definitely just talk about Law Help real fast if you're able to.
Oh yeah, I'd love to talk about Law Help. Yes, Law Help is amazing. And I want to be able to see if I can just show you my screen real quick. I see I just have, I don't have Law Help coming up. Maybe it will if okay, can everyone see the identity theft link that I sent on Law Help? That's just got some general resources for identity theft. But I want to just go to our home screen real quick and show anybody on the line that's never been to Law Help. Click on the self-help library, and covering our topics today, you're probably going to want to click on this Planning Ahead and Elder Law tab, because that will show you some of the things that Marit and Hunter talked about today, particularly this elder abuse tile, but some of these others like guardian conservatorship also could fall under the topics and the nuances that our other two main presenters talked about today. And I really appreciate you, Hunter and Marit. I learned so much from both of you today. But I also want to just, since we went into that topic of just general crime victim stuff, just go back real quick and show you guys that in the self-help library, in addition to the tabs on planning ahead, we also have abuse and crime victims. So if you get into that one, you can see there's an identity theft, but there's also a lot of elder and vulnerable person abuse, and the phone number that that Hunter and Marit referred to earlier for reporting. And then the one that goes straight to you, Hunter, that's good to know. I think it was the MARC, the Minnesota Adult Abuse Reporting Center. That was really great to learn about as well, just to know that that you two are like, well, especially you, Hunter, that you see all of those calls, and you too, Marit, yeah, for just talking people through what it's like to go ahead and report. As someone who helps people as well, I was just thrilled to get those tips from both of you about helping people and about listening. So thank you. And thank you, Crystal.
Yeah, no, thank you, Mark. I'm really glad that you showed that MARC, because as they were talking about MARC, I had never seen it before. So I'm glad you brought it up. So it is located in Law Help MN. If you guys had any questions, feel free to go in there. Look through Law Help. Man, there's so many different court forms that are available, FAQ sheets, that's really helpful for community partners, community organizations, and also individuals when you just have questions prior to seeing an attorney or even after seeing an attorney. And you are able to go to lawhelpmn.org on any of our legal kiosks as well. So it's available for all of our Minnesotans. Like I said, we have about 87 in our 22 counties that we serve, but we have 250 legal kiosks within the state of Minnesota. So that's huge. You should be able to at least get to one, or go on your computer, go on your phone to be able to get that information. We have about 3 minutes left, so I want to make sure that I'm keeping on time with everybody. I'm going to share my screen really fast here. There we go. Let's hope I'm able to get that there. Perfect. I appreciate that we had all of our presenters on today. Marit, Hunter, Mary, thank you so much for being able to come on and give us some really great information about senior exploitation in Minnesota. If for some reason you are a community provider out there and you're like, hey, I have some information that I definitely want to get out to the different counties, that would definitely be wonderful resources, feel free to email me, call me. If you use the QR code, you'll even be able to book or schedule a Zoom meeting with me so that we can either get your information to pass along to our clients, or so that we can get you on as a presenter to talk to everybody about the different resources that you have. We have the legal table that happens every third Tuesday of each month, where we talk about a different civil legal topic. So I just wanted to make sure that you guys knew about this. I also want to make sure that you guys have the information from our panelists today. If any of that information is incorrect, don't shoot the messenger. Very sorry about that. But please make sure to just put the correct information in the chat. You can reach let's see, Legal Services, Minnesota Elder Justice Center, the city of Dilworth, which has the police department there. Also the lawhelp.mn.org, so that you can get any of those. If you have any other further questions, feel free to let me know. Otherwise, this presentation is recorded and will be on our YouTube channel by Friday, so that you can share that with any coworker or organization that was unable to make today's presentation. Thank you guys so much. Appreciate everything that you do. And you guys have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you,
Bye,
Crystal.
everybody. Thank you.